So we continue with Economics A level, Chapter 9, Market Structures and Concentration Ratios. When we talk about market structure, we're simply talking about different characteristics, different features in the market that makes different firms in that market to behave in a certain way. So that is what market structure is about. Different features, things that happens in that market that makes different firms in that market to behave in a certain way. Then for concentration ratio or market concentration, we're simply talking about the extent to which a large firm in that industry dominates the market share. But there's always going to be market share. So how much percentage do you owe in that market? And when you talk about market share, we're simply talking about your brand sale divided by the total market sale multiplied by 100. So the percentage of what your brand owe in that market, the numbers of customers you have in that market, the numbers of sales you make in that market, compared to or in relative to your competitors. That is what concentration ratio is about. I think the point is clear. So for market structures, I wrote, market structure are the characteristics of a market which determine a firm's behavior. So they are combined. We have an industry or market, which is the combination of firms. So how firms behave in the market is based or is influenced by their market structure. So what are the main characteristics that determine the market structure? The first one is the number of firms in the market and their relative size. We're going to talk deeply about that later on. Two, the number of firms that might enter the market and the ease or difficulty with which the new entrants might enter or exit. The first one I talked about here is how big or small the market is. The second one is about barriers to entry or exit. How is it accessible for firms to come into that market? It's also a determinant of the market structure. The third one, the extent to which the actions of one firm will affect another firm. So are they interdependent or independent? And the fourth one, the extent to which goods in the market are similar. Are the goods in that market homogeneous or non-homogeneous? And the last one, before I go into details, is the extent to which all firms in the market share the same knowledge. In the market, do we have perfect knowledge or imperfect knowledge? So these are what we need to talk about when it comes to market structure. Any question about that?
No.
So now we'll go deeply into each point at a time. So we're going to start with the first one. The number of size in the market and their relative, the number of firms in the market and their relative size. Are you there? So I wrote, the number of firms in an industry may vary from one to many. The number of firms in an industry may determine the kind of market structure in such industry. For example, we have a pure monopoly. We call it a pure monopoly because it exists where we only have one firm or one supplier in that market. So it is only just one supplier in that market. That's why we call it a pure monopoly. So we have oligopoly. This is a market structure where few large firms dominate the industry. So there's another market structure where we have few large firms dominating. Most of the time we have this in the banking industry. And the third one, which is perfect competition or monopolistic, not monopoly, monopolistic competition. Here, all firms in that market are small and none of them have the ability to dominate the market. Monopoly, a firm makes the industry. In a monopoly, a firm makes the industry. In an oligopoly, few large firms dominate the industry. In the perfect competition, we have our monopolistic competition. We have small firms, but none of them can easily dominate the market. Any question about the nature there?
No.
So that's the first one. Then the second one, the number of firms that might enter the market and the ease or difficulty with which these new entrants might enter or exit. Here I wrote, market structures are not only influenced by the number of firms in an industry and their relative output, rather by the potential number of new entrants to the market. So we don't just talk about market structure based on what they produce and the size, how big or small they are, or the price. We talk about them based on the ease at which we can go into the market or exit the market. So there's always going to be barriers to entry or barriers to exit. So in a market where there is difficulty in entry, that's barrier to entry is likely to have different behavior compared to a market where there is no barrier to entry. So like an oligopoly. With an oligopoly, though we're still going to talk about oligopoly in details, but the behavior in an oligopolistic market is different from the behavior of a monopoly with a monopoly. In a monopoly, there's only one firm there dominating. The firm makes the industry in a monopoly. So the way it's going to behave, the way the firm is going to behave is going to be different to a firm in an oligopolistic or in an yes, an oligopolistic. Because in an oligopolistic, we have few large firms dominating compared to a monopoly where we have just a firm determining the market.
Okay.
So in a monopoly might not in a monopoly. One of the reasons why we have monopoly is because there's barrier to entry and exit. So the firm has dominated that to the extent that you don't even see yourself competing with it. And for oligopolistic competition, they might use what we call they might use collusion to ensure that new firms are not coming into that market.
Okay.
Do you understand? So behaviors differ when it comes to the ease or difficulty to enter the market, and that makes it the different kind of market structure we have. So then, okay, that's the second one. Then the third one, are you there?
Yeah.
The third one, the extent to which all firms in the market share the same.
Similar.
Yeah, I wrote about the same knowledge first.
Okay.
I wrote about the same knowledge. I'm going to go back to that. I wrote, okay. So the extent to which all firms in the market share the same knowledge. So yeah, I wrote the level of information. When you talk about knowledge, it's simply about information. How accessible is information? So the level of information available in the market may determine the market structure. There's perfect knowledge if buyers and sellers have the same level of information in relative to prices, outputs, and products. So therefore, if one firm puts up its prices, it will lose all its customers because they will buy from elsewhere in the industry. So there's perfect knowledge in an industry. And mostly we have perfect knowledge in the perfect competition, where their buyers are the price maker. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because they know they have information about what you produce, they have information about the quantities you produce, they have information about price. So that means you cannot exploit them. So if a firm in the market that there's perfect knowledge tries to increase its price, it's going to lose all its customers to competitors because customers know the price of goods. They don't have all information is accessible to them, so you cannot exploit them. So if you want to, if a firm tries to exploit customers, it's going to lose all its market. It's going to lose all its market share or customers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
So this means there can only be one price in that market. A market that there is perfect competition, we can only sell at the same price. So in the perfect competition, they mostly use what we call competitive pricing. Are you with me?
Yes.
So when we talk about perfect knowledge, the perfect knowledge also implies that a firm has access to information which is available to other firms in that industry. So we call it perfect knowledge, not because customers have information, but also, sorry, please. We call it a perfect knowledge, not because customers have information about or have access to information about price, output, and what else? Output and product. But we call it a perfect knowledge because each firm in that industry also have access to information that other firms in the industry have access to. So we have a perfect knowledge, mostly in the perfect competition. And why do we call it a perfect competition? We call it a perfect competition because products that are being sold in the perfect competition are homogeneous. So firms in the perfect competition would simply find a way to differentiate their products. But what you have to put in mind is that in the perfect competition, we have perfect knowledge. And when we talk about perfect knowledge, it simply means firms and customers have access to mostly the same information. Is perfect knowledge clear?
Yes.
Okay, knowledge is about what? Information. Clear, right?
Yeah.
So then we have, however, there's imperfect knowledge where there are industry secrets. Individual firms may not know the market share of their rivals, or they may not be aware of new technology or new products to be launched by competitors. As a result, information could now act as a barrier to entry, preventing or discouraging new firms from entering the industry. There's also imperfect knowledge. And when we talk about imperfect knowledge, it means firms do not have access to the same information that others have. So they are industrial secrets. And when they are industrial secrets, it becomes a barrier to entry. Because if I don't have access to information, I will be discouraged to go into that market. as an investor, you would really want to have access to information. You want to know more about the industry. But if there are secrets, if there are industrial secrets, it simply means you are taking, it is uncertainty. It means you don't know what will happen afterwards. So that might discourage you from entering into that market. So that's one of the reasons why we could have barriers to entry, lack of information. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Any question about that? So the next one is the extent to which the action of one firm affects another. Am I going forward or downward now?
You're going upward.
Okay, yes, okay. So entrance. No,
You have to go to the extent of which goods in the market are similar.
I have to go back there, okay? Are similar, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Are similar. Do I write it? I think it's there. Please check. Yeah, thank you. Oh, that was very effort. Okay. So the extent to which goods in the market are similar, that's where we are right now, right? Okay. So let's okay. So the extent to which goods in the market are similar. So when we talk about similarity in goods, that means they are identical. So we have, when it is identical, it simply means they are homogeneous. So firms in that market produce almost the same product. So yeah, I wrote in some markets, goods produced are similar to some extent, but it doesn't mean that there are no difference, grades or types. Goods that are identical are called homogeneous products. So we call them homogeneous products because these products are similar. Like rice, we have different type of rice. Rice is rice, but there are different grades of rice. There are different types of rice. So in such markets, firms in such markets may use product differentiation by producing non-homogeneous products to control their own market and creating a brand, which may in turn allow them to build brand loyalty. In the market, another factor that will determine the characteristic of a market structure is the kind of product produced in that market. And that's why we need to talk about homogeneous products. So if the products are similar, if they produce homogeneous products in that market, firms will find a way to differentiate their product from those of the competitors. And they might do that by creating or building a brand. And what is a brand? A brand is a unique name for a product. So if you're able to build a brand by differentiating your product, it allows you to have control over the market, over your own market. Having control over your market might allow you to charge premium prices. So most of the time, firms firms that produces similar products find a way to advertise or market their product to make sure to the extent that they will convince customers or potential customers that their product is superior compared to those of their competitors. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Any question about that?
No.
Okay. So that's similar products, right?
Yeah.
So now the numbers of firms the next one is habits, please. The extent to which firms share market knowledge. We talked about the perfect knowledge already, information.
I think we have to go to the extent to which the actions of one
Firms, yeah, will affect another. So that's where we have independent and interdependent. Are you there?
Yes.
So the extent to which the actions of one firm will affect another firm. So here I wrote, in the market, there are two possible relationships between firms in an industry. Firms can either be independent of each other or interdependent. So when we talk about independence, it simply means the action of one firm does not significantly affect another firm. So that means we are in the market where your decisions would not have any impact on my own decision, or does not have any impact on what I sell, how I sell. That is independent. But so that means when we talk about actions of people or actions in firms, or actions of firms, it's either your actions does not affect others or it affects others. So that is why we have interdependent and independent. So it is independent if the action of one firm does not have any impact on other firms. That is independent. Then we have interdependent, which simply means the action of one firm might impact on the others. So I wrote this for interdependent. This implies that the actions of one firm will have impact on other firms. In the market where there are few firms, the action of one firm may affect another. Since interdependence means uncertainty, then a firm in the market may not know how other firms will react if it makes a change to the price of a product or spending on advertising campaign. where the action of one firm affects the others. It is difficult, it is uncertainty. So you wouldn't know how other firms in that market would react. Mostly, if you increase the price of your product or reduce the price of your product, they might as well do that. So whatever you do, they might retaliate. So when there is interdependence, where we have interdependence in the market as a feature, it is mostly about retaliation. So whatever you do, you wouldn't know how others will retaliate. So that ends the characteristics of market structure. So in the next class, we're going to talk about competition itself and the market structure. Any question about it?
Yeah. No.
Okay. It's out this.